What's up, and welcome back to the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast. I'm your host, Shay Haddo, and in today's episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Heather Moyse, who is a 4-time Olympian and a 2-time Olympic Gold Medalist in bobsled, and the first Canadian woman ever to be inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame. So in today's episode, we dove into her journey. She has a lot of things on her resume as far as athletics go and kind of what she does in her work today. But we went into a lot that's going to be valuable for both parents and players. We talked about what is really required and what it takes to perform at the highest level, whether that be in sport and business, just in your life in general. We talked about how you can challenge your assumption and your fears to prove what you're really capable of. And this was just such a solid and awesome conversation that I personally got so much out of that's going to help me, and I know will help you to really challenge those fears, challenge those assumptions, to reach those goals. And there's so much in here for parents as well. So whether you're a parent, athlete, coach, I know you're going to get a ton out of this episode. We even dove into some specific parent things. Neither of us are parents, but I think you're going to get a ton of value specifically out of that. So I'm really excited for you to dive into this episode. Of all the conversations I've had, I love each and every one, but this one personally, I think is going to help me to break through some of my own limitations. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll catch you inside the episode. Hey, Heather, what's up? Welcome to the podcast. Super excited to dive into all of your awesome things on your resume that I learned about you. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, Shay. This is awesome.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. I want to hear, and I know everyone has a big story, right? But I know yours is especially interesting to me. So I want to dive into your journey a little bit. Just the big highlights around youth athlete, as a youth athlete, a college athlete, and the Olympics. So kind of just take us on the journey of Heather, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so my story is, like you said, it's actually pretty unique to most Olympic athletes. Like if you were talking to a high performing athlete, it's very different. Like most of them would grow up dreaming about going to the Olympics or going I grew up in a really small place. So I grew up in the smallest province in Canada, Prince Edward Island on the East Coast, island, accessible only by a plane or a 13-kilometer bridge, which was a ferry when I grew up. So
Yeah.
Your pond was pretty small. So for me, this is actually one thing that I talk to a lot of people about, is the fact that a lot of choices we make we think we have this autonomy, we're making our own choices, but we're limiting our own choices. The boundaries of our direct exposures and our environment are setting those boundaries for us. And so for me, it's not that I ever thought I could never go to the Olympics. Mm-hmm. It just never occurred to me because Olympians, they were TV people. They weren't everyday normal people like I considered myself to be. So I never even never considered it. So I just played sports for fun. I grew up playing all sorts of sports. I went to university and played 3 varsity sports. Varsity is Canadian. University, college. But it was just, I didn't even lift weights during that time. I didn't train seriously. I played for fun. And then it wasn't until I was 27 when I was kind of heavily recruited to do bobsledding for the second time, because the first time they asked me, I actually turned them down. I wasn't interested at all. I finally just was like, oh my God, okay, I'll do the testing for it. I'll just do the testing. So I went to this testing camp. I missed the first day of testing because I had rugby nationals. And so they gave me permission to miss the first day of testing. And then I got there, and fortunately I missed the first day of testing because it was all weightlifting and I'd never lifted weights before. So I wouldn't have told them. I would have just tried to copy the person who went in front of me and totally would have crushed myself with a bar or something. But anyway,
right.
So I missed that first day. Second day was all plyos, power testing, speed testing between timing lights, pulling a weighted sled, all those things. Still tests I've never done before, but at least I wasn't gonna, kill myself flatten myself with a bar. So I ended up actually breaking one of their testing records, and I was just wait a second. I just broke a record amongst all these athletes who've been training for years, and they're supposed to be representing us at the next Olympics. So all of a sudden, I hadn't even seen a bobsled yet. I hadn't been down a track yet. Like I didn't know if I was going to love the sport, but I fell in love with the challenge. Could I learn a new sport? Could I learn to do it well? And could I learn to do it well in time to actually represent my country at the next Olympics? But the kicker is that the next Olympics were less than 5 months later. So if someone had said, "Oh, you could do bobsledding if you trained really hard for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years," I probably would never have even, like, it wouldn't have been a thing for me. Like, there was nothing about the sport that drew me. But that challenge, like, can I actually learn a sport that's so technical, that comes down to hundredths of a second?
Yeah.
Can I actually learn how to do this and actually compete for my country in less than 5 months? So that was my challenge. And then each of the 4 Olympic Games for which I competed, they all presented me with 4 different challenges. So I even stopped in between, and then they kind of reeled me back for the games, and then I thought I was done again, and then they'd reel me back, and then it was kind of interesting. Like, yeah, I guess I did bobsledding over a 13-year span, but only competed in 7 seasons and was in the Olympics 4 times and won 2 Olympic gold medals. So that's the bobsled run of things. And then on the other side of things, to balance things out, I played rugby for Canada. So I played rugby growing up and love rugby. Still love rugby. But then when bobsledding happened, I kind of had to, and again, I didn't join the national women's rugby team until I was 26. Like, I actually didn't even know we had a national women's rugby team until I played in a tournament. And then afterwards they announced that I had been, added to this national long list. And I said, what long list? And they were like, that's when I knew. So I just, like, I know this sounds very oblivious, but I didn't grow up watching sports on TV either. So sports was literally just extracurricular to what I thought I was going to do to earn a living, because I grew up in an academic family. I have a master's degree. I got a master's degree in occupational therapy. So, like, I just thought that, I was choosing choices in my lane. I wasn't thinking outside the box. So now part of what I do in my business is helping people actually look beyond and actually look at the possibilities that really do exist in their life, instead of just limiting those to what they are directly exposed to. That's kind of all of that in a bit of a nutshell. So
yeah, I mean, it's so interesting at the very beginning, like you were talking about how a lot of the time, like, your environment does determine your boundaries, and you don't know what you don't know, kind of deal. And you're right. It's like you don't always have the choice, because you don't always know what all the choices and possibilities are.
Exactly.
So that's just, like, such an interesting idea that I want to dive into a little bit. And, like, how can someone, and let's just say, like, a teenage girl athlete, right? Like, who's probably listening to this, if they are in an environment where it's like, there's just no way, like, that think that there's a possibility of them, playing in college or at the Olympics or whatever it is, like, how can they kind of, like, break out of that box maybe that they've been put in by their environment or society in general?
So this is I'm going to say a problem, an issue, a thing. Like, it's not, it is what it is, but it's not just youth that have this. We all have, like, as adults and everything. So we kind of limit these things, and we also set goals. What I've discovered is that most goals are set with a binary outcome involved. Like, you either achieve it or you don't achieve it, right? Success or failure, you achieve it or you don't. That's it. So I've been trying to train and teach people to look at it like, you set a goal, and if you want something here, actually try and see what could maybe even be farther than that, and just play with that idea and set the whole thing as a spectrum. The whole thing should be a spectrum. And instead of saying, this is the goal I'm going to achieve or I'm not going to achieve, if you look at everything and say, I want to see how close I can get to that. And by doing that, it does 2 things. One, it gamifies it. So instead of just saying, like, so you gamify it, and you start to live in the how. You don't say, can I do it? You start thinking, how can I do it? So right away you're like, okay, well, just hypothetically, how would somebody do that? How How could I do that? How, instead of can I, which is a yes no answer, it's a by, like you've got two answers, yes or no. It is so that automatically starts people brainstorming. It starts people thinking outside the box, and it sets people up for solution minded, approach to things. The other thing it also does is it empowers you, me, everyone, by disempowering the naysayers. So this is a huge strategy, because sometimes we don't even pursue the things we really want to pursue. It's not because we're afraid of failure. It's actually not afraid of failure at all. We're actually afraid of what other people will say, or how they'll judge us, what they might think of us, what they might talk to someone else about it. Like, that is what we're actually afraid of. Failure itself is a nothing thing.
Yeah.
It's really absolutely. And it's not even, sometimes it's just the act of pursuing it. We're worried that people will say, oh, look at her, she thinks she's so much better, trying to, that's mine. That's the thing that holds me back a lot. That's the thing I have to talk myself down a lot. Now, the reason why I talk about that whole gamifying, that whole spectrum thing, is gamifying is one part, solution-minded thinking. The other part of that spectrum thing is that if someone says, oh my God, as if, do you really think you're going to achieve that? Whether it's somebody else or whether it's our own little voices in our head, it doesn't matter. All you have to do to disempower that voice and to re-empower us, me, you, whatever, is to say, you know what? I have no idea. Maybe I won't make it all the way, but I am just really excited to discover how close I can get. And then it doesn't matter. You have shut them down. You have shut the little voices down. And you're like, it doesn't matter. If I'm pursuing this because I actually really enjoy this, then that actually doesn't matter. And I am just kind of really excited to see how close I can get. Like, after my hip surgery, the day after my hip surgery, I had a couple of media interviews, and I told them that my goal was within the next year to be representing Canada again on both the rugby field and in the bobsled, back on the team for the Olympic bobsled team within, the Rugby World Cup was within a year, and the Olympics, I had to qualify within a year. And that's what I had to say in the interviews. I was like, yeah, these are my goals. And the interviewers were like, okay,
right.
Okay. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter if I make it or not. Sure, it is highly unlikely that I will, be able to do both of these things, that I'll be back on the rugby field in 6 months. I get it. It's probably not going to happen. But I love what I do. I love this challenge. And I want to see how close I can get. Can I make it? Can I get back on the team again? And that is so empowering.
I mean, just you saying that, I wrote it down on my sticky notes because I'm like, that's so powerful. How close can I get? Just saying that to myself, it's ooh, challenge accepted. You know what I mean?
It's no. Gives me goosebumps.
I know, me too.
Say this all the time. When you throw that to a spectrum and you use it in two ways, one, the gamifying, and the other one, just disempowering the naysayers and just creating, instead of just having a goal, having a challenge, challenging yourself to just see how close you can get. And then nothing else really matters.
And I mean, as cliched as it is, the destination, there is no destination. It really is the process. And so asking the question of how close can I get is more focused on the process and the fun of actually getting there, if there is a there.
Exactly. I get a lot of questions from parents. Now, I'm not a parent. I'm a kick-ass auntie, but I'm not a parent.
Same.
But I do get a lot. Yeah, I do get a lot of questions though from parents, and part of that might be because in my book I did talk about how I was parented a lot, and also because a lot of parents are asking because their kids are athletes, so they've got these questions, and sometimes I cringe. I'll hear a question and I'll cringe, and I will immediately have the feeling that this goal is more important to the parent than it is to their kid, and I'm so I kind of ease into this a little bit. But sometimes I get these questions and they're just remarkable. And by being able to tell them, you talked about destination versus the journey, and it sounds super cliche and people are like, oh yeah, well, whatever, but I want, I really want that. I get it. We all really want that thing. But you have to put things in perspective. And for some people, it becomes this choice. For some people, it's, going to school versus maybe trying for a sport, or traveling and sticking with this team, or, some people feel like they have to stick within their sport because if they suddenly take a step away to do something they've always wanted to do, their spot might be taken, or, all these different things. So what I love about my story, having come in and started at the age of 27 in the professional athlete, circle, is that I can tell those people, no matter whether your child stays committed to this sport or you, whether I'm talking to the athletes or the parents, whether you stay committed to this sport or not, if someone comes in at the last minute who is better than you, they will take your spot. So some of those things you have to weigh, whether are you at that moment going to think that you wish you had done something else in the meantime, then that needs to be taken into consideration with your decisions. If you say, you know what, it doesn't matter, I wouldn't have done anything else anyway because I love what I'm doing. I mean, yes, it totally sucks that I'm not on that ultimate team at the end, but I honestly wouldn't have chosen anything else. I don't want to work a 9 to 5, or I don't want to do like, this is what I love doing. I'm passionate about it. Then it doesn't matter, because even if someone doesn't take their spot, you could be 2 weeks out from the Olympics or a world championship, and you could break your ankle on a curb in the parking lot. Like anything like that can happen. And then that is over and that is done. And are you then going to regret not having done something else, or are you going to regret, whatever? And if you can look at those situations when you're making the decision initially, instead of making decisions based on the best case scenario, but making decisions based on the worst case scenario, then that's when you'll know that you're making the decision that you're going to be happy with no matter what.
Yeah. And I mean, a question that I get a lot around, like, what team should I try out for? And whether it's the parent asking me or the kid, like, what team should I try out for? Like, I always lean into, and I don't know if you would agree or not necessarily disagree, but just if you've ever used this, like, I always lean into, and I'm a big feeling person. So I'd say like close your eyes, like visualize each scenario and ask yourself, like, which one, like, feels better in your body? Like, which one do you feel the possibility, and which one do you feel like more of the contraction? Is that something that you ever have done yourself, or like teach people to do at all?
Well, I've never gone there, actually. I've never really had to do that. Now, decisions for me have come down to sometimes it's, do I want to do this or not? And sometimes it's not so much, like for bobsledding even. I mean, I've done a lot in bobsledding, but there are aspects that I loved about the sport, but the thing that kept me there was not the sport. The thing that kept me there was like whatever particular challenge it was at the time. And I really embraced those things. And so if it had ever come down to a choice between, like, I was kind of given this ultimatum, and a sponsor coming in the bobsled team, he said, you're going to have to quit rugby. And I said, I'm sorry, but I was recruited to bobsledding as a rugby player. So if you don't want to, like, then I'll go push for another team. Like, that's fine. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I'm not going to compromise who I am, the things I love, for a sport I'm doing, as a challenge for fun. And I think that you really have to know yourself in sport. And it was a little bit easier for me because I came in when I was older. So for me, I came in and it was easier for me to make more value-based decisions instead of feeling like you're sucked into momentum and you're kind of on this autopilot and momentum and making decisions based on like pressure, or feeling like your spot's going to be lost if whatever. But if you kind of remove yourself from there and say, well, what if I were just an athlete coming in? And what would that look like as a newbie, as a whatever, instead of someone who left and came back? What if you were just someone who just showed up? Then you have this different perspective on things. So it's different. So I haven't actually used that approach. I like that. That's really,
no, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're all just different approaches, right? But I do like it's kind of like how you're describing it, in my opinion, is kind of like you're zooming out and seeing things from a different perspective. I don't know if this will resonate with people, but I always like to take the perspective of a hawk versus a mouse, right? Like, the hawk is up, they can kind of see all the situations, whereas a mouse, like, they're on the ground, they're the ones running and fearful. So it's, it's kind of like with the blinders on. So I think that's a decent analogy for it. Nice. Okay, cool. I want to shift a little bit into, okay, so you've performed at the highest level in like various disciplines, and there's a lot of girls listen to my podcast, and I love it. Like they want to play at the highest level, and for them that might be a lot of them. It's I want to play in the Olympics, I want to go pro, I want to play, in college. And so I know this answer isn't just a one-word answer. There is no secret, but I just want to have a conversation.
One-word answers.
You're like, yeah, just one word, right? That would be a fun conversation. So we'll have a discussion around it. But like, what, in your opinion, like, what does it take to perform and like perform well at the highest level, and whatever that highest level means for someone?
So there are different ways of looking at it. I'm sure you have heard of, I'm not sure if some of your listeners have heard of this though, but the 10% physical, 90% mental. Mm-hmm. So I've actually read up on this, and it can be interpreted in different ways. The kind of simpled version of it that I use a lot is that when you're at that high level, there's really only a 10% variance, in my opinion, of people's physical skills, their physical ability to execute whatever it is they're able to execute, whether it's, strength, endurance, whatever. There's really only 10% variation. The difference at that level comes on the mental side, on the mental toughness, the ability to, the mental strength, the ability to, we hear it all the time, that person who is the best in the world at something, who cracks under the pressure and, just totally kind of falters at the big event, like when all eyes are on them, when it really matters to everyone else. And they just can't perform, and they kind of let the pressure get to them. They just crack. So that is someone who is probably that 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, best in the world physically executing their skill. But the 90%, however good you are there, is what allows you to execute what you're physically able to execute. And if you only have like a 30 out of that 90, then you're not going to do so well. Right. But if you are, say, only a 2 or 3 out of 10, like you're still in that high level, but you're definitely not the best in the world, and you're just over the cusp, but you're in there. But you are solid. Like you are that reliable person, that unwavering, whether you're down by 20 points, whether you are at the foul line about to shoot a free throw with 3 seconds left on the clock to make whether you're, like whatever it is, you are calm and steady, and your performance, your execution of your physical skills does not waver. You are clutch. Yeah. And those are the people that are so important to have on the team, especially when it comes to big events, because those kind of the superstars, if their mental game is not as solid as their physical execution of skills, then they can't be relied on in those big games, in those big events. So for me, it's so much of it has to do with that mental toughness. So, I mean, yes, you have to obviously be able to execute the skills to do your job. And that's the same as everything, by the way. This is so transferable. I mean, I speak to business leaders and community leaders all the time. So, I mean, someone needing to do the biggest pitch of their life to land a client, and they know all the information. They know inside and out. They've been working on this, this file for, months and months and months. And then they go to do the presentation, and all of a sudden they're forgetting these things. They're stumbling. They can't, their thoughts, they can't verbalize. Like it's the exact same thing. And so it's about managing that mental stress, managing the pressures, managing like the energy that is consumed and utilized, like all of that stuff during those big events. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that is probably, in my opinion, the most important stuff to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really glad that that was your answer, obviously, because like and I didn't tell you to say that before, I promise everyone. But I'm glad you said that, because like a lot of times people don't think about that. And it really is, I think it was on another guest interview I had a month ago or so, where he was talking about like, at the highest level, it's not the physical, because you're like right on par, you know what I mean?
You're
but
there.
At the highest level, it's the mental that separates like the very best from the just good people or average people. And so I love that. And I want to get into like the word mental toughness. Like, what does that mean to you? I want to dive a little bit deeper into that.
I think mental toughness is kind of like, if you actually think about the word tough, it means that you're like, I don't know, kind of like you have this shell or this exterior where things aren't going to bother you. They're not going to penetrate. They're, you're tough, so nothing's going to get through. And I think that it's the same thing, really. It's that whatever's happening around you, the media, the, comments that you might happen to overhear, or the way you manage, and if a comment is, that a comment would affect you, like it would affect me, most likely, you either know how to turn that around and put it in perspective, or you figure out management skills ahead of time to avoid certain situations that might put you in a difficult spot. All of that is really just kind of protecting your ability to actually do your job and be able to execute those skills. And a lot of that is managing the stresses and the pressures and putting those into perspective. Also realizing that kind of what you need in order to perform. And so some of that is kind of self-learning and personal development growth and figuring all that stuff, like the optimal level of adrenaline. You know what I'm talking about? The bell curve, that optimal level of adrenaline to perform at your best, to be able to execute at your best. And that is managing the pressures and the stresses and the energy in and outs. And that's pretty much it. So that's very simplified, but it's very easy to say, don't be stressed or, don't be nervous. You can't say that stuff. You have to be able to channel it, or figuring out how to bring things down. You're at that adrenaline level down or up to the point where you're going to perform at your best. So
yeah, and I mean, I like what I'm getting out of it is, number one, like you do have to know yourself. Like, how do I perform best? What does get under my skin? Like that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then also like adapt. That's a hard word for me to say. Adaptability. Oh, there we go. Adaptability and like flexibility to be able to like roll with the punches and like deal with the shit that's going to hit the fan. And I think it is like this toughness, don't let anything else in, but it's also this fluidity of being able to handle yourself.
But see, the thing is too, is with team sports, it's not just about knowing yourself. Like, you have to know what you need in order to perform well, but sometimes you also have to know what your teammates need in order for them to perform well. And sometimes that means maybe like when you get really, you might be the best, but it's not about demanding that everyone kind of give you what you need. Sometimes if you're really good, you will be that, you'll find that compromise where you're still getting enough of what you need to do well, but someone else might need something else, like a different approach, like the type of music that's listened to before you go out, or you need to figure out what that means. And coaches need to be aware. Well, I mean, athletes, when they get to a certain age or a certain point, they can do this themselves, but coaches, when they get these group huddles and they're like, this is the only game that matters, like this is what we've all been waiting for, this is the big, like this is it, like that drives me like up the wall, like that drives me up the wall. As soon as everyone goes out onto the field or whatever, probably one of the best players makes a mistake they've never made before in their life, like out of nowhere, they're like, what, how why did they? It's because their adrenaline is so high, it's so past the top of the bell curve that they're like just doing things that they would never normally have done. And
that's so true.
Coaches, a really good coach will be able to, do that pep talk. If like 2/3 of that team need, or 3/4 of that team need that, like rah, get up, go, whatever. Great. But they need to know which athletes they need to pull aside and bring them back down, saying, this is just a game like we've always played. You need to play the same way you played last time, and the time before that, and the time before that, because that is how we got here. It's the same game, same size field, same side court, like same size ball, whatever. Like it is, they need to downplay it. They need to downplay the importance of the event. They need to downplay like this, whatever, they need to do that. And athletes, when they're kind of on their own later, they need to know whether they need to do that or not. They need to know whether they need to listen to like, hardcore heavy metal music to
Yeah.
pump them up, or whether they need to listen to classical music and like some instrumental waves or something to bring them down to a place where
Right.
they can actually perform.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I love that you brought up the coach thing. Actually, just had a conversation with a volleyball coach and about the whole like I think your players are like too ramped up. Like I think that a lot of them may need to
yes.
come down a little bit.
Yeah.
And when I didn't figure this out until like probably my senior year of college. But I learned that for me, I needed to have a calm period and then right before have a ramp up period. So I think
Mhm.
it takes a little bit of experimentation to figure out how you
Totally.
perform the best. But other than experimenting, I mean, any other, and this is important for parents too, like if your kid doesn't need to be ramped up, don't give them the pregame talk. Please, for the love of all that's holy. Um,
I don't think parents should give a pregame talk anyway.
I don't either, like, period. I
So,
mean, I don't,
yeah.
I think we're on the same page with that.
Yeah. I just
Yeah,
have to
I
say
mean,
something about
go
parent
ahead.
that for a second is I know a
Yeah.
lot of parents believe they're being supportive. Um, and I love that parents want to be involved and want the best for their kids. But I just want parents to be aware of sometimes how if they're paying thousands of dollars for private lessons and something and whatever, and even if you're doing it because that child wants it at the time, if they know what's being put into it, is that child ever going to feel comfortable telling you that they don't actually enjoy it anymore? Or if that's the only time that they think they're going to spend with their parent because their parent loves, that's their parent's favorite sport of all time, and that's the only way that they think that they can bond with their father or bond with their mother or whatever, if that is their bonding time, are they going to feel comfortable saying that they don't enjoy it or they don't like the team because of the atmosphere, or that, to me, it is very, it's also like if your child is on a team, um, if a parent only goes to watch them when they know for sure they're going to be playing, that is to me
Yeah,
not acceptable.
I
My
agree.
my when I first started bobsledding, our very first World Cup race, like first world event, this was my first event ever, and it was in Calgary. So my parents are like, okay, great, it's in North America, we're gonna fly. So like literally flying 2/3 of the way, more 3/4 of the way across the country. It'd be like in the States going from Maine to Denver, like you going all the way across there to watch a race. And I just on the phone, I just said, I won't even, you're booking your flights. I don't even know if I'm going to be racing. Like we won't even know till that, like we'll do a push off. I don't even, you don't know. Like that's a lot of money. You can't, I don't, I was just like, I didn't want them to waste their money. I thought they would be wasting their money if I wasn't racing. And my mom just said, Heather, you should know by now. We're not going to watch you. We're going to support you. And like
Love
that to
that.
me still gives me goosebumps. It still gets me choked up because it just shows they could care less. My parents could care less if I was playing a sport. They could care less if I went to the
Yeah.
other. The only reason why they care that I went was because it was a goal of mine and they're excited for me and whatever, but it does not matter what I was doing. And to me, that those words, if I was just there watching on the sideline and just polishing runners and getting the sleds ready for someone else to race, if I was the water girl on a rugby pitch, if I was, the alternate at the Olympics because I didn't make it, it did not matter to them because they were just going to support me in it, not to
Yeah.
watch me. And that to me is a huge,
Yeah. That's so
huge
powerful.
difference. And if a kid knows that the parents are going to watch, if they're riding the pine the whole time, the whole game, and they're in it, maybe they don't care. Maybe their whole thing is because they like the social atmosphere and they don't want to make the next level. Like to them, it's just their parents are supporting them in something that they're enjoying doing, and it doesn't matter about performance. So
I mean, it's such a subtle difference between watching you and supporting you. Like,
I know.
but when you really think about it, I'm like thinking, if my parents, I'm not saying that they didn't say this, but said, I'm here to support you when I was riding the bench, I would have felt like, not so much pressure anymore. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Like even after it, they could say, "Oh, that was a great game." Like even though you didn't step on the field, my parents would have been like, "Oh, that was a great game," when so and so whatever. It didn't. There was no like, "Why didn't he put you on?" or why didn't you play, or none of those questions, because to them it
Yeah.
didn't matter. Um, People are like, did they
Yeah.
ever correct you in stuff? And I said, yeah, but nothing to do with sports. Like if they pulled up in the parking lot, they pulled up in the parking lot and they were there for the last 10, 15 minutes, whatever. Did I ever get reamed out? Yes, I did. But it was probably because I was talking to somebody while the coach was trying to explain a drill, not about
Right.
missing the net, or, not being fast enough, or that I should have passed to so-and-so because they were open. Like it was literally like, you're not paying attention. They were raising a human being, a contributor to society. They weren't raising an athlete. So that was
Yeah.
not their job. And they did nothing at all to do that. And I have the biggest admiration in that.
That's amazing. And like
Yeah.
we could have such a conversation around like what you said at the beginning around, if your kids know that you're spending thousands of dollars on something. This was my case. My parents spent thousands of dollars on my club team. And one of the reasons why I felt a lot of pressure is because holy crap,
Yeah.
my parents are spending a lot of money for me to hate this. To be honest, like I wanted to quit, but I didn't because I didn't want to waste their money. And I've had this conversation with parents
That's
that I work
crazy.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like some parents will say, "Well, I get that, but also I think it's valuable for them to know a little bit about how much it is so that they'll work harder for it." Like, what would you say to that?
I don't.
I agree.
Yeah, it's not their money. It's not their money, and
Yeah,
it's not that. To me is pressure. Like
I
that's
agree.
pressure. That's not support. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's the difference is I think that disciplining can be different. It doesn't have to be knowing the value of what they're doing. Like if someone's slacking off, then there are other ways to, not saying I've paid this much money for you to be part of this.
for sure.
I think that it comes down to different bouts of discipline, like kind of discipline. And I mean, of course, this is coming from a non-parent. But how I was parented, it would be like they would just say that, well, there's a registration. So for them, it was more teaching me about commitment as opposed to money. So they would
Yeah.
say that you've committed to a team. So they're like, you do not, you're not allowed to quit in the middle of a season. But just because you play one season doesn't mean you have to play the next or the next
Yep.
or the next. And
Yep.
so it kind of just becomes a decision. Do you want to commit to this? Whether it's free or whether it's whatever, like thousands of dollars, like that was not the issue. It had to do with commitment. And
Yeah.
that's what they focused on. So I don't,
Yeah, I like that because it's focused on more of the value and the internal motivators as opposed to if they do know and it's like, oh, I want them to know so they'll work harder. Like, well, they're working harder for what? For some external thing? Like that's not what we want to teach them, right?
no.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think it's super important for parents, and some people may disagree, and that's fine. Yeah, and it's funny because I'm not a parent either, but I think we both have some really valuable experience
I do too.
from either good or not the greatest parenting that is valuable for parents that are going through it right
100%.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. For a selfish reason, but I think people will get a lot out of this. I want to know a little bit about your experience hiking, summiting is the right word,
Oh, yeah.
mountaineering, the one of the highest mountains in Antarctica. Like
Yeah.
what? So,
Yeah.
okay. First question, why did you decide to do that? I think your answer is going to be because it was a challenge, but why did you do that? And like, tell us about it.
The funny thing is, it wasn't because it was a challenge.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
Yeah. It was because,
You're like, it was super easy.
no, no, it was not. It was actually one of
Just
the
kidding.
hardest, both mentally more so, mentally and physically challenging things I've ever done, actually.
Okay, cool.
But there was a man contacted me, and he said that he started explaining like that his family is a huge supporter of the military, of our Canadian military, and also of rugby. Like their whole family is a huge rugby family. And apparently, I had done a charity fundraiser with Rugby Canada and him and like whatever, this small private kind of fundraiser group years ago. And I guess he was impressed with me and whatever. Anyway, so he's
Cool.
telling me this, and he says, and so we do a lot of donating, and then there's this trip to Antarctica, and it's a fundraiser for True Patriot Love Foundation, which is a fundraiser for our Canadian military to to help some of those our servicemen and women transition back into civilian life when they're done their service.
Okay,
So
cool.
I was like, okay, great. So here I am asking, and they're doing this climb and stuff. He's explaining this climb, and I'm expecting him to ask for an Olympic item to donate to an auction. Like, this is literally what I'm asked. I'm like waiting for the ask. Like, do you have an Olympic
Right.
coat or mitten, like something? And then all of a sudden he said, I'd like to sponsor you to climb this mountain. And I'm like, and so you want me to you want me to climb it? And he said, yeah. So it was like $50,000 for these civilian people to go.
Yeah.
And so he was going to pay for me to do it. And I'm like, okay. He goes, I think if you did this, it would bring more visibility to the cause. And than just if it were just happening. So I think it would bring more visibility. And I think it'd be great to have you, like your personality and stuff would be awesome to have on the trip. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. Okay. Well, how long, like what are we talking about? So there was like a week commitment for training in August. And then it was like a month you had to commit to, the month of January, because they weren't sure with weather how long things would take. And anyway, so for me, I don't work a 9 to 5. I'm speaking all over the place at conferences and corporations and, events all over the world. And so I was like, what if all of my income for 3 or 4 months, what if I have to turn down that? Like, it's kind of like what if I have to turn down events to do that? And I don't know if my business can handle it. And I don't know. And one, I absolutely hate the cold. And two, I actually don't really like walking. So what is happening here? Like, I'm a sprinter, not a walker and a stroller. So I'm like, none of this sounds like really exciting or appealing to me. So I said, you know what, I got to give it some thought. I'll give you a call back. And then I would say, I don't know, within an hour, maybe, I don't even know how long it was. All of a sudden I felt shame wash over my entire body. And I could not believe that I had asked for time to think about it, because for me, the answer had nothing to do with the challenge. It was all about, these people have put their lives on the line for me to be able to live a life I'm choosing to live.
Right.
And I felt shame that it took even I called him back right away. I didn't even wait till the next day. I don't think I called him back. And I just said, listen, I shouldn't have even thought about it. I'll figure it out. If I turn down an event or 2 events or whatever, I need abundance thinking. It'll come around, whatever. It doesn't even matter. I wouldn't even be able to have the opportunity to speak at events if these people literally weren't choosing to put their lives on the line for me, for us, for whatever. So I was really, I felt really honored, actually. And it was probably one of the best experiences of my life. Not the climb. Some people got really emotional because the physical climb of being able to do it. And it was very cool. Very, very cool experience. But for me, the emotion came from the people. I was like so there were 15 civilian people who paid, mostly corporate CEOs or CFOs of big companies and investors and stuff who were paying to go. And then there was me, like a photographer and some tour guide, like some guides, I guess not tour guides, we're not touring, but like guides.
Yeah.
And there were, I think, 8 members of the military. And all of them, shared their stories with us at the end. And some of them, it was for the very first time. They had never spoken these stories, and they were crying. We were sobbing. It was the bonding that happened over that entire experience was powerful. It was so powerful. One of the guys we got down from the summit, and he just gave me this big hug, and he was just and I gave him this big hug back, and I was like all happy. And then he goes, Heather, I just want to thank you so much for doing this and for raising it. And I'm like, thank me, thank you. And I started sobbing. I was so emotional. I was like, what are you thanking me for? He goes, for representing our country and for, making us proud. And I go, oh my, what are you thanking me for playing a stupid sport? Thank you for I was so
Mm-hmm.
like just, and then I was a wreck. So I kept my goggles on literally for the next few hours. Like I just wouldn't, I'm like crying. Nobody can see. I'm like just sobbing like, oh my God. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Anyway,
that's
it was
funny. What
very
a cool
emotional experience.
experience.
Very
I was going
emotional.
to ask, did your tears freeze up there?
Oh, I might have sent you a photo. I have a picture of me at the summit, and there's a summit. My hair, so I have one of those like neck scarves on, right? I'm in the
Right.
park, like the biggest parkas ever. Neck scarf, so the neck scarf's up to here. My hair is like this, and then I have goggles on, and my hair, because of all the condensation, is frozen. So my hair literally looks like
Oh my
a
gosh.
beard. Like I'm like a wizard, like Gandalf, like a wizard with like this white, it's all white condensation
That
frozen.
is so
I,
funny.
I sent that picture to my hairdresser before I got home. And I was like, brace yourself. Like,
Like, oh, we got
brace
a lot of
yourself.
work to
Yeah,
do.
there's a lot of work ahead. So anyway, he's
Oh
like,
my
what on,
gosh.
he got there and he was like, I don't even know what to, anyway,
That's
yeah,
hilarious. Yeah,
so
I'm like
pretty
getting
amazing.
teary eyed just because it's just kind of funny. But what a cool, incredible experience that was. And just like, how long ago did you do that?
That was in, 2016. Oh my God.
Okay, so it was a minute ago.
That was like 7 years ago. Oh my God. Yeah, 7 years ago. Mm.
What was the biggest lesson you took from that experience?
Oh, I don't know if it was lessons so much as, well, I did learn a lesson about myself. I think I already knew it,
Yeah.
but it was really, it really drove, like the message was really driven home. It is easier, definitely for me, and I'm assuming for a lot, like for many people, it is easier to know, like lay it all on the table, know what to expect. Like, how long is this hike? Like, if this next thing is 3 hours and it's freezing cold, okay, I can mentally prepare for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But at the 3.5 hour mark, I might lose my mind. Like, if there's
Yeah.
3.5 hours and we're still not there and we have to ask how much further, and you're like, oh, I think it might just be another hour. Mm-mm. Like, I would rather you say it's going to be 4.5 hours. And if it's only three, great. But
Yeah, for sure.
I can mentally prepare for anything. But the whole, like, once you mentally prepare and you're free, you are free, like, you are so cold and you are so tired, and you're like, they're like, oh no, I think it's just like a little bit. No, I need to, like, I can handle it. I think people need to give other people credit and know it's better to, what is it, like, under promise and over deliver,
Yeah,
or whatever
right.
that thing is. Like, I really think that you need to almost tell someone worst case scenario. Like, we hope it'll be less, but it could be here based on the conditions, or
Right.
tell me worst case scenario. I can handle it. Like, I can handle worst case scenario, but the change, that was a
Or
day.
not knowing. Like for me, I'm thinking of in college when they wouldn't tell us how many sprints we had to run. Like it was so hard, like not knowing what the finish line was. But if I knew like I had to run 10, it's like, okay, I can like get down with 10. But if I
Yeah.
don't know, oof, I don't know.
I
That's
know,
kind
I
of a
know,
similar
I know
thing.
what you mean. It is. I don't. Anyway, that was a bit of a rough. But another
Yeah.
thing that I took with me that wasn't really a lesson per se, but just a kind of seeing a concept in action, was one of the military one of the military guys. He had been blown up in, like, in an IED, like in an
Yeah.
IED, and had like 17 surgeries before coming. And um and he still had a couple of surgeries he still had to get after. The doctors told him he really shouldn't do this climb, and they're like, you're probably not, you won't be able to summit. Like, I don't know how you'll be able to do that. And I actually wrote about this guy in my book, this section in the back.
Yeah.
And he made it all the way to high camp, but then he was in so much pain that he just opted not to do the summit day, which was in
Okay.
11 hours. We didn't know how long it was going to take, but it took 11
Ooh.
hours to summit and come back to high camp.
Okay.
And he decided that morning that he didn't want to go, because even though he wanted to see how far he could go, um, he knew that you're attached to rope teams, And if he had
Yeah.
to turn around, it meant his whole rope team had to turn around.
Right.
So he selflessly stayed at high camp. And then when people got back down, he was the first one. Like, he was just celebrating people and whatever. But when we were leaving the next day, he was in so much pain from his back that he was being kind of, it was like no man left behind. Like, they carried him on sleds.
Yeah. Wow.
And brought him down, and they took turns like shifting and whatever. And to me, that was really had a huge impact on me.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was, I would say, probably one of the bigger the bigger people on the trip. And it was just, it didn't matter, like that, it just didn't matter. And I think we just need more of that in the world. And I think that's why it touched me so much. And I was like, I just wish people could experience this.
Yeah.
And know this.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just puts things into perspective, I'm sure, and just like, I don't know, just puts things into perspective about like how big the human heart can be.
Yeah.
Also, and just like how so many people are literally putting their lives on the line for us to do what we want to do, you know?
And it puts things in perspective. Like, perspective is what it's all about. Like, whether someone's dealing with a really terrible situation, okay, all right, like, yes, I'm not discounting the fact that is terrible, but let's try and figure out how we can pull something good out of this, or at least use this to help someone else, or, anyway, there's a lot to be. Anyway, it was a pretty great experience.
Nice. I have one last question for you, and then I want to hear a little bit more about your book and stuff too. But I think this is an important question, and a big part of what you do and what you help people with is like helping people to challenge their assumptions of what they think they are capable of, and like also and getting to the point where they can like prove to themselves that they can really like do something. Like how do you personally help people kind of to challenge those assumptions and fears? And I like the word assumptions because it's like, oh, I assume I can't do something, and therefore it creates a fear, perhaps. So
it's just not even at the front of our mind. Like,
right,
we assume so many things. We assume way more things than we actually realize. Like,
yeah,
we like, I don't know. We don't ask that person out because we assume.
Yeah.
We assume they'll say no, or we assume they're taken. Like, oh, they're so attractive. They obviously are taken. Like, obviously.
Right.
That person's probably single waiting to be asked because everyone's assuming the same thing. Like, we assume that we're not qualified enough, or we assume so many people are going to try out that, there's no point in trying out, or we assume that we're not going to apply for that scholarship because, I doubt I assume they wouldn't give it to someone like me, or that I'm not, it just, we literally we're sabotaging our own paths. We're sabotaging our own levels of success. We assume way too many things, and it's just, we assume we're too tall, or we assume we're too short, or we assume that I'm not the body type they would like, or we assume that we can't do something because we've never done it before, or like, it's just, and sometimes we don't even really think about it. It's just so automatic.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I guess the first step would just be being aware of the assumptions,
Learning to be aware of it.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, you wanted to talk about my book. I talk about this also in my keynotes. But my mom, I'll do this quick little anecdote. I was home visiting my parents. I guess this was the summer of 2016. They were going, so I was visiting back in PEI, and we were just about to sit down for dinner. My mom comes in and talks about, she's like, your father and I have added something to our bucket list. And I was like, I didn't know they had a bucket list, first of all, but anyway, they have one. And so I was really curious. So I asked them what it was. And she said, your father and I have decided that someday we are going to ring in the new year ballroom dancing in the Imperial Palace in Vienna. And I'm like,
oh my gosh, how cute.
Yeah, that's like a legit bucket list. Like, that's a legit bucket list goal. I'm like, okay, I like that. Okay, good. And so I was just like, oh my God, that's awesome. Are you going to do it this year? She said, oh God, we can't do it this year. Oh, what are you doing this year for New Year's Eve? Oh, nothing. we don't have any plans this year for New Year's Eve, but we can't do it this year. Well, why not? Well, Heather, it's too late. What do you mean it's too late? Well, it'd be sold out. Mom, it's July. Like, and she's like, I know, but it's a big deal. Like, it would be like, this is televised. It's like, hosted by Julie Andrews. There's royalty. There's celebrities who go to this thing. Like, it's a really big deal. So Heather, it would be sold out by now. Are you sure? She said, oh, I'm pretty sure. Okay, but did you check? She's
Right.
like, no. So of course, being the daughter, I like hopped on my laptop and I, pulled up, found the exact event she was talking about. And I was just like, Mom, there's still tickets left. Like, you can even decide which ballroom you want to have your pre-dancing meal in. Like, I said, do you want me to just get you and Dad tickets now? And she's like, just looked mortified. Like, looked like, oh my, all of a sudden could be real, right? So there's
Right,
this
right.
fear of like, oh. So she said, oh, well, it would be more fun if we went with another couple. So I was like, well, what about your sister, like Aunt Roberta and my Uncle Alex? They had traveled
Yeah.
to Germany the year before and they had a great time. So she said, oh, they'd be so perfect. They'd be ideal, but they're not going to be able to go this year. Oh, why not?
Assumption number two.
Yeah, option number 2. So, well, they're not going to be able to go. Why not? Well, they're doing their big trip across the Northern Passage this year. Oh, well, they're doing that over the Christmas holidays. Oh no, they're doing that in September, but they're not going to want to do 2 big trips in a year. I said, Mom, are you sure? She said, oh, well, I said, are you sure? And she goes, you call your aunt then. So I did. I literally, that moment, called my aunt, told her about this whole bucket list trip thing. And she was just really quiet for a second. She said, well, I'll run it by your uncle, but, tell your mom, we'll get back to her. And I was like, okay, that's it. That's all that mattered, was that we'd covered all our bases. There was
Right.
nothing more we could do. Actually, nothing more we could do. So we sat down for dinner. 10 minutes later, the phone rang and my Aunt Roberta said they were in. They did it. That year, my parents and my aunt and uncle danced their way into 2017 in this Imperial Palace in Vienna. So
All by challenging some assumptions.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we need to have that other person. And
Yeah.
honestly, like, that's what I do a lot of times as a coach, right? Someone who's helping someone get to the next level is challenging the assumptions or the self-limiting beliefs or what I'm calling them excuses, but the rationale
Yeah.
that people have used as being reasons for things, but really it's things that we've convinced ourselves are true, but they're not. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's the majority of what I do, is help people not sabotage themselves.
I love that. I mean, we all do it. So tell us a little bit more, like, we'll transition then, like, a little bit more about, like, who you work with, how you work with them, and then a little bit about your book and anything else you want to share about what you do.
Yeah, so I do I do some coaching. It's not my full time. Mostly I'm speaking. I'm speaking at conferences
Yeah.
and conventions, and I love that. And I get to meet people afterwards and all that stuff. But I do miss the coaching. My master's degree is in occupational therapy. So I'm not practicing as an OT right now, but the training that I did as an occupational therapist is literally helping people achieve the goals that are important to them. Now, I worked mostly with post-stroke and like helping people, or TBI, traumatic brain injuries and stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of neuro rehab, but it was the same. It was, what goal is important to you, not important to someone else. What is actually important to you? And sometimes that's the hardest thing for some adults to figure out, what they actually want. Most New Year's resolutions don't happen or don't ever get followed through because people are setting goals they think they're supposed to be setting and not ones that they actually want to achieve.
Right.
So my step 1 is helping people. And you were asking about demographic, and it's pretty much, I don't have everybody needs the same.
Yeah, it's
Everybody
true.
has goals. Everybody needs
Yeah.
the same in breaking those goals down. Some people are at different stages. Some people need help in the performance side, the high performance side. Some people need help just breaking things down, seeing a timeline so that they can actually see the path to get to where they're going to go. Like they know what they want. They just don't know how to break it down to even see that it's possible. And for some people, it's the initial sabotage stuff. It's figuring out, some people are living a life right now, they don't know how they got there. And they feel like, they're like, okay, I'm somewhat successful, but I feel like something's missing. I don't feel fulfilled. So my main goal is, I used to think that I was helping people get to the next level, but I don't want them to get to the next level if that's not where they really want to be. So even though I could help someone get to that next level, unless we do the work and make sure that that's where they want to be, then I don't care if they go to the next level or not. I want them to get the next level of fulfillment. And if that means the next level in status or in job or in whatever, great. But if that just means doing less work and having more of a balance, having more family time, like whatever is bringing you joy, finding a volunteer job that's giving them a sense of purpose, whatever that is. So that's basically what it is. So yeah, I'm actually working right now in, because I travel so much, I only usually work with a few clients at a time. And it's more retainer basis because it's more flexible, and it has to be, it's not just, I was always the square peg, right? I was always the square peg that people were trying to fit in round holes. And so I do not have a standard coaching thing for anybody. I've even had people saying, I could make you a millionaire. We could develop these programs. And I'm like, programs that probably wouldn't even work for me. So why, like,
right.
You know, at some point there might be something that I can develop that can get people to a certain level. But ultimately, I think that everyone's so unique that it's not fair to give them a one size fits all. So
I love that.
That's kind of what I do. And
Beautiful.
I'm starting to develop retreats right now. So
cool. Will you let me know? Because I think that would be awesome. Like personally, let me know when the retreats are.
100%. I would love that. That's cool. It is. I'm working on them, and for me, it's combining my love for travel. So it is going to be in a different. How I see these is people are needing that annual recharge, and so I'm hoping that when people fall in love with these retreats and how they feel when they leave, that it might be an annual thing for them, and at a different location. So that's what I'm looking at.
Beautiful. So and then. Yeah, let me know. And then your book, what's the title of it again? And then Amazon, where else can people
so the book is called Redefining Realistic, and it is
I love that.
Personal development book, but I would say it's with a splash of memoir. It's not an autobiography. I don't feel like I'm an autobiography person. Like I could never see myself just putting a thing out there saying, "Hi, read all about me." Like it's not me, but I don't know if you know the name John Maxwell from the States.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I actually opened for him speaking years ago at a few events. They did this kind of thing, but I did not know who he was at the time, and he laughs at me now because it was very funny. But I opened for this thing, and afterwards he came up and said, like, I hear a lot of speakers, and very rarely do I hear a speaker who can actually connect with such different audiences as you can. Like, we spoke to 6,000 high school students in a Coliseum. And then we did a private VIP luncheon for like CEOs and like mayors and premiers and like whatever and all this stuff. And then they amalgamated into the business community leaders in the afternoon. And he was just like, yeah, it was so he asked to mentor me. I didn't know who he was. So he has kind of not really been a mentor, because I don't know that he remembers what it's like to not have a staff of people working for him, but he's become a really good friend, and he wrote the foreword for my book. He's the one who actually convinced me to write the book, because I called him and I said, after I finished speaking, people are now asking me if I have a book and I don't have one. And so he said, well, then write one. And I'm like, okay, you make it sound so. He goes, yeah, write one. From the guy who's written like 80 books, right?
Right, seriously.
So I'm like, okay. So it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, was writing that book, because it was balancing like my messaging. He said, don't write an autobiography then. Use your stories as kind of the way to highlight the messaging. So there are like a bunch of anecdotal stories in there from my life. That's and pulling things in, and my reasons, kind of the reasoning as to how I've come up with certain philosophies and certain ways of thinking. And this book is written by like in the way that I kind of currently speak. Like I'm starting to develop a keynote now where I can talk about frameworks and help people through things. But right now I want my audience to leave starting to question their assumptions about what they currently believe to be possible. Right. And start like all of a sudden contemplating possibilities and being excited about that. And having that transformational thinking, just to kind of be excited to discover what they're truly capable of. So that is exactly what the book is about. It's divided into 3 parts. So it's called Redefining Realistic. Part 1 is Shift Your Perspective. Part 2 is Seize Your Potential. And Part 3 is Shift Your Perspective, Seize Your Potential, and Own Your Story. So the third part's Own Your Story. And that's about impact. That's about choices. that kind of third part is all about that. But anyway, it's so yeah, my story pieces are kind of in there, but it's hopefully a way to help people change the way they think. And I've had such amazing feedback and reviews. Like it's been, those are the things that
yeah,
those are the ones where you're like, okay, that's all that matters. Like it was totally worth it. So you asked where you can get it.
Yeah,
I believe
Amazon.
Just soft cover, I think. There's a soft cover available on Amazon.
Cool.
We actually pulled the hardcover. There were warehouse issues. So if it's for someone who wants it as a gift, or if they want me to sign it, like personalize it, then they can do that just through my website. So
Awesome.
They go to my website, just heathermoyse.com. It literally, you can get it there. And also there are links on my website too. Audiobook. I narrated it.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was pretty cool, actually. But I figure as a speaker, someone else reading it in my voice would be so weird.
That would be weird, yeah.
Super weird. So anyway, I did an audiobook, and a lot of people just love that because it's like me talking to them. Like I'm just literally talking to them as they're doing housework or doing whatever, going on a bike ride. So basically I also believe it's available on Kindle too, like ebooks and stuff if it's there, but it's pretty much everywhere. Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah. This conversation, like I have a lot of great conversations on my podcast. Like I love each and every one of them, but I would say this conversation helped me personally more than any other conversation I've had. So it was an awesome episode for other people, but also I'm like this, like the challenging assumption thing. I'm like, it's not complicated, but it's just something we need to be reminded of. And so,
so when you want to do that, you just have to do that are you sure piece.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Like you almost have to like, okay, you just do something that shuts you down and you're like, wait, am I sure I can't do that? Like I might not have been able to skip 3 years ago, but can I skip now? Like you just like, sometimes it's these stories that have stuck with us or some experience and it's just, are you sure? And until you're sure, like have actually looked it up, then yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So thank you so much for coming on. I know it's going to help a lot of people. And are you active on social media at all that people can connect with you?
I would love, so mostly Instagram.
Sweet.
It's just Heather Moyse and a bit on I'm on Facebook too. I kind of post on both.
Okay, cool.
The Instagram, I try to respond to as many, like if people are commenting and stuff, I try and do that. DMs are really hard for me to get to if I post something.
Yeah, I tried, guys. I tried on the DMs and I didn't.
I actually try really hard and I get to a lot of them, but if it's anything, like I've almost missed. Like there's a whole business, like a speaking engagement I missed because they contact me on social media and I'm like, this is a social platform. Like if it's business, you need to contact me through my website. Like that's what the website's for. Anyway, so I tried, but the problem is that if I post something and I get a huge influx, then messages just automatically get pushed.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I try.
I know. I'm giving you a hard time. I'm
gonna go look for it now. Like I'm literally gonna go look. Like, hi.
Now you'll go find it. Yeah, cool. But yeah, thanks again for coming on. We'll make sure to post your book, your website, and your social media in the show notes. And thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh my gosh, Shay, it's been great. It's been really great talking to you and getting to know you a bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather.
Bye.